This episode is brought to you by Monogram. Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, your guide to designing a life you love. Join us as we explore the keys to living the life you want without compromise. Hey everyone, welcome to the Design Dash podcast. I am your co-host Melissa, and I'm here with my co-host Laura. And today we're going to talk about what it's like being an individual contributor versus being a leader. And the reason why we want to talk about this is because if you're an interior designer and you're thinking of either you've just set out on your own, or you've been on your own for a while and now you're thinking about growing, you have to make that transition from being comfortable as an individual contributor to then taking on all of these other added responsibilities as a leader. And that's not an easy transition. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll start with you, Laura, because you've done this. It was maybe a long time ago now.
I mean, a long damn time ago, but yes.
We can still talk about it. Um, so we were talking about this a little bit earlier because I think that it's really challenging. I think it's also probably really challenging in creative fields. And especially with people who, I mean, from my experience not being a designer, I feel like every designer that I've ever known is a control freak, is an overachiever control. And so it's so hard. It's so easy to say, you know what, I'm going to handle this myself. You know that you can do it. Like I mean, for most of our listeners as interior designers and firm owners, you've been doing it. You've been doing it well. So, but now you're adding people to your team and you may not know if they can do it, but you need to rely on them. Like, how do you make that? I feel like the first thing you have to do is change your mindset.
God, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Yes,
No.
this is a mindset shift. And yeah, for me, it's been a long time. I haven't been an individual contributor for 18 years, I guess. Yeah, like when I hired somebody within 3 months of starting my business. So I was an individual contributor for 3 months. I mean, and I went back and forth. There were times that I was very much in it. And there still are times that I get very into a certain project or working very closely with a certain client. But yes, it is a mindset shift that you are not alone. You are not the only one that can do things. Um, and it can actually, on the flip side of like being an individual contributor can be really important. And like you're doing a lot, you're impacting a project in a huge way. Um, it can also be detrimental. So if you are, especially if you have a team that you need to lead and you are still in an individual contributor mindset, it can have a very negative impact on the people that you work with and ultimately your projects. So I think, yeah, just being in this leadership role for a really long time, there's a place for both. There's a place for that individual contributor and there's a place for that leader. But as a firm owner, if you would like to grow and you don't want it to be just you, the second you hire an assistant, you are no longer an individual contributor. You are leading someone else, you are mentoring and managing someone else, and so you have to shift your mindset.
Yeah,
But you've
you're going
probably
from
seen
me to we.
me to we.
Me
Oh,
to
that's a
we.
good little snippet, little highlight there. Yes, and I think just for the success, you're thinking more of the success of the team and the project rather than just like what can I do today by myself for this one project or this one client.
So how do you
Um,
build that skill set? Like, how do you go from, hey, I'm a great designer. I'm designing everything. I'm uh, doing all the biz dev. I'm doing all my invoices. Like, I'm doing it all. And now going to, okay, I can't do it all. I don't want to do it all. I, what do you need, I think, to do to get your mindset straight?
um, oh man, that's a good question. I think take a step back first and evaluate overarchingly what am I working on and who am I working with. Um, I think it also is helpful to take personality and like personal feelings out of it, and think of it more as like asset allocation. And I mean, it sucks to think of people as assets, but that's the reality. Like, how am I managing this big project instead of this one thing? How am I managing this whole company instead of this one project or this one facet? Yeah, so I think it's just taking a step back and like really looking at it big picture,
Yeah,
forest for the trees.
you have a broader scope of responsibility now. Like your purview is not just this one piece of a project that you're working on. And
Mm.
even as a firm owner, I mean, obviously you're working on so many different things, but I feel like, I mean, even for me, not as a designer, going from an individual contributor, just thinking about my individual goals, my specific outcomes for this particular project, and then managing a team. Now you're thinking about the collective and how do I get this collective to be successful? And
Yeah.
how do I align all of their efforts, especially when, you don't just have like one assistant, but I mean, like, or you're managing a design team of how many do we have on design now? 8, 9.
Well, but the beauty thing is though, no, I'm managing a leadership team, and then that leadership team is managing their teams. So
But you're responsible for all of them. I think that's
why are you putting this pressure on
crazy.
me? Yes.
You're-
Yeah, no, for real. That's true. And I do talk to every single person in the firm. Even if it's not like on a daily, weekly basis, it's probably on a monthly basis that I am touching base, even with like the intern who's in the design library that's filing stuff away.
Yeah.
That God, that's also the control freak thing. So I'm like, this
I,
plays something
that's
else.
what we do. And I'm not a designer. So I
Listen,
understand
listen,
that.
Miss Intern, what are you doing? Um, I think you probably see this from I mean, even though you're not a designer, it's the same. You've been in other industries too, and I don't know if it plays out differently in other industries, but I think it's probably the same across all organizations. Um, but then I start thinking about an individual contributor, like what does it even mean? What's that definition? Because within our firm, is anyone an individual contributor? Who like what role would you say is an individual contributor in our firm?
We'd like to thank our good friends at Monogram Appliances. We've partnered with Monogram for over a decade with our design firm, Laura U Design Collective, and we're so happy to partner with them in producing the Design Dash podcast. Monogram sources the highest quality materials for their appliances, from commercial grade stainless steel to unscratchable sapphire glass. Monogram ensures lasting beauty and unmatchable quality for your luxury kitchen. And not only that, but they have an amazing team who we love working with, and we know you will too. So thanks, Monogram. Purchasing is an individual contributor. They have
Okay.
to be laser focused. I think individual contributors are going to have this very specific skill set, this very specific and targeted expertise. They don't manage anybody else. I mean, I think that they are fairly strategic. Thank goodness that we have such a talented team.
Hey,
But
that's on purpose.
they don't have to be like they're just masters of their domain. They don't need to focus on everything else. I also think too, and one of the things that I found, well, see, I'm a control freak, so I don't know if I really struggled with this so much. I was like, yes, finally. But I think that one thing that when you're going from individual contributor to a leader, you have to start making decisions and you have to be the person where the buck stops with you. And I think that that's when you can realize that maybe somebody on your team, which I mean, now we're talking about bigger teams, right? Because as Laura mentioned before, she doesn't have to manage every single person day to day. She's managing a leadership team. But those people, like we knew that they were ready to become leaders is because they didn't necessarily need input on every single little thing. Like they could say, hey, here's a problem. I think I'm going to solve it like this. I'm going to solve it like this. It's done. Like that kind of decisive ability to present a problem, find the solution, and then execute on it. I think is the overarching thing that you have to do.
Is there ever a time like, it seems like in the trajectory of most people's careers, they want to move from being that individual into more of a leadership or management role. But is there ever a time, and I mean, this is loaded because the answer is yes, but when should you not move someone from individual contributor into more of like a manager or leadership position?
I think if you can recognize that it's going to end up being detrimental to them and detrimental to your team. I think that sometimes like and I mean, people talk about this even outside of design, but like, I mean, you see these on Forbes articles all the
All the
time. They talk about the Peter principle, right? Where you're promoting people to their point of incompetence. And it's usually they become a manager and all they lose like the great skill set that they had when they were an individual contributor. And I think that sometimes it's hard for me, and I'm sure it's hard for you, Laura, because you're just such a boss, right? But like some people, I think, are okay with being an individual contributor and they prefer it that way. And if they were, I mean, when we've seen this, if they were to be in a managerial role, everything just kind of starts falling apart.
And you have to be so careful about moving them up into a new position, especially when they may not even want it because you
Yeah.
cannot put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Right.
Once like, you can't move them back to that individual contributor role once they've been moved up to a manager role. I don't know that I've ever successfully done that myself in my firm. If you've done it successfully, I would love to hear from you. But I think once you've moved someone up and it is not successful, they're not happy. We are not happy as a firm. Either we're going to have to part ways or they're going to leave. I don't think there is ever a situation where they go back.
No. And I'm trying to think if like there's a time where we've done I think there have been some times where we've done or times that I've seen it happen in other parts of my career. These people always leave.
Yeah.
They'll always go and find something else, which that's okay too. And I think we're starting to see a lot now women who are in middle age and they're at this pivotal point in their career where they're just like, you know what, maybe I don't want to be a boss anymore. Maybe
Yeah. Being a
I
boss
wanna
is
do
hard.
something really simple not simple, but, like, I wanna, like, have ease and comfort. I don't wanna make all of these decisions anymore, and I think that I mean, I feel that way sometimes all the time.
Yeah. And own every single facet of what
That's
I'm
it.
doing. And so that is the beauty of being that individual, right? Like you
Exactly, you
don't
don't
have
have
to
to
consider anyone else.
No, and all I can focus on is what's here at the present moment. I don't have to think about what we're going to do in terms of revenue or team building in 6 months. Like, I don't have to think about that. I can think about the next 2 weeks, and that is such a relief sometimes, I think,
Yeah.
if that's all you have to worry about.
Yes, but you're also in that role wearing every single hat.
Yeah.
You are doing things that you may, and we talk about this in our hiring workshop. You're doing things you may not want to do at all, but you have to because it's just you. Or you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing because you have no clue how to do it. And it's a completely inefficient waste of your time.
Yeah.
So there is that part of it too. So yes, like that individual role sounds very freeing in some ways. But then I sit there and I'm like, God, but if I was by myself, then I'd have to do bookkeeping. I'd have to invoice people. I mean, assuming I'm still working and I'm not like an individual, like going to the sauna all day.
No. Yeah.
That's assuming I'm working as an individual by myself. There's a lot that you have to do. And anybody that's a solopreneur or a freelancer that's listening, you know this. Like, man, you got to do everything yourself. And it's a lot. It can be a lot. So I think there's pros and cons to everything. But once you get into that leadership or managerial role and outside of that individual contributor role, you can find freedom there too.
Of course. Of course. And I
Um,
think it also depends like we look at what motivates you. I think that one of the reasons why I do like being in a leadership role is like you get to have so much more of an impact. Now, you do get to have an impact obviously if it's just you solo. Um but I think there's something different when you get to have a major impact, but you're still only working on the things that you really want to focus on. Like you don't have to do that invoicing and you're still having a major impact on the overall
Man,
design. If we're talking about interior designers. But I mean, I actually have a good friend right now who had her own firm and she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she doesn't. She doesn't. She
I
sold it.
feel that.
I don't want to deal with clients anymore. Like I need to take a good long break. Of course, now she's considering going back into it because she's intrinsically motivated by having that impact and like leading teams and all that kind of stuff.
So
So
she really just needed a break
she needed a break, and,
or like, yeah, sabbatical.
yes, but wanted to still work, so she went back, I guess, to be an individual contributor for a while. But
Okay.
then, you get kind of restless, like, you get in that position, it's like, "Oh, I'd like to do it this way," or
What's
"I'd do something
now what?
differently,"
Yeah.
like, "Ooh, I'm about ready to be a leader again," and so she took about, like, a year and a half break to really get her mindset together, but I do think that that's one of the big cons about being a leader is because you are accountable for every single thing. That burnout it can really creep up on you and be pretty intense.
Yeah, I mean, I went through that. You watched me do it. I'm out of it now, thank God. But yeah, for probably a year and a half after COVID, we were just so busy during COVID that I came out of that like, oh my God, I cannot boss anymore. I cannot lead anymore. I am wrung. out. Um, and in that case, I just went to my complete, like, complacency state, and took like, mind made me really take a step back and take a break. But the good news was I had that leadership team in place, and you guys stepped up and, like, did what had to be done when I wasn't as in it. I mean, I wasn't out of it fully, but I wasn't as in it as I like to be. So I can see that happening, like, as a leader, you just need to take a step back into that individual space. And
Yep.
that's very black and white, right? Like, there's a lot of gray areas in there too. Um, I don't even know what those gray areas would be, but
But I think what one thing that's kind of funny is you always say that if all of this just fell away, what's your backup job?
oh, then I'm gonna be a barista at Starbucks.
Right, yeah, like totally.
But I would be a
That's
team
great.
lead, like, let's qualify. I would be a team lead. I'd be running that Starbucks location. Damn, I love making coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now. Like, that's also one of my passions, design, growing businesses, and coffee. Yeah, that's, like, kinda my dream, though, is, like, I never know I always know that I would never just, like, be without. Like, I'm pretty damn gritty. I would go kick ass as a Starbucks barista. What's your fallback? When you're done being a leader, what are you doing?
Ugh, nothing. I don't
Yoga instructor.
really Yeah, I could be a yoga instructor, but man, it can be kind of a toxic sort of environment. I think I'd just
Which
be an
makes
artist.
no sense, but okay.
Did it? I know, but it is like there's a lot of toxicity in the yoga world. But I think I would be like a ceramicist or something. Like that's what I would do. I would
Mm,
just be something totally different, totally creative. Like I wouldn't want to commoditize it in like in any serious way. Like it would just
that's just
be
for you.
and then yeah, it's just for
You
me.
like you have a little Etsy shop.
Yes, yeah.
You're popping up at a farmer's market.
Yep. And I don't even care how much I make. I'm just doing it because I love it.
Mhm. You may just be losing money right and left, but it is feeding
That's
your
fine.
soul.
This is a hypothetical situation and I can deal with it.
Yeah. See, like, cranking out coffee after coffee feeds my soul.
Yeah.
I
Well,
will
I
be
mean,
so
it's hard. It's hard being a leader and it like you're on. You're on all the time. I think that's another thing too about being an individual contributor. Like I can put
yeah,
my headphones in and just work, 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 work. And it's great. I don't really have to interact with anybody. But as a leader, like, I have to interact with somebody every day. I'm motivating them, I'm inspiring them. You're
that's
articulating vision all day long. And that can be exhausting.
that
Even
is a
even though it's
brilliant
what I want to do, it's exhausting.
yeah. I think that is such a strong point, and I think as leaders, when I am happiest, it's because I have carved out time to put my headphones on and get in my flow state, and if I go too long without doing that, I am really freaking unhappy. Yeah, so that is such a good point. So even as a leader, you can still carve out your time to function as that individual, and I think you have to. Um, we take at Laura U, we take clarity breaks. And so we ask our entire really the entire team, but we really try to enforce it with the leadership team because we need those days where we are not being bombarded with questions. We're not being pulled away from flow or working on something, even if somebody asks a quick question, it takes whatever the studies are, 10 minutes. I don't even know, 12 minutes to get back into what you were doing previously. So I think those heads down days where you can just disconnect and work on your own stuff are so nourishing, and I hate using that word. It's one of my words, and I'm like, "Bleh," but I feel like it's very applicable to this. Like, it really just feeds you, or at least me. I'm speaking for myself.
Well, and I think you have to have that time to balance. Like as an individual contributor, I think that that's what makes you so restless is because you don't have the freedom to then lead other people, all of a sudden and start mentoring others. I mean, I guess you could, but I think to be a good leader, you have to balance that time between the strategic and then the tactical, and then just especially being in a creative industry, taking that break to just let things coalesce, to just imagine and to
Ugh, yes.
wonder like, because I really like those things. I love those parts about a leader, about being a leader is just I get to wonder about the future. I get to plan for the future
That's
and
one of
it's
your, zones of genius, right, is
it
wonder.
is, yeah, it is wonder. I love just getting to sit down and imagine, okay, where can we really take this? And then, you get dragged into some of those tactical things about like, okay, so how do we actually make this happen? And I feel like as
Yeah.
long as I've had the time to really wonder about that success, the tactical parts come really easy.
Yeah.
But if I don't have that time, which those are the things I really love, I get really burnt out.
And bogged down. It's almost hard to make decisions from that state.
I think so. Yeah.
I've
I think
struggled with that
inspiration.
too. Um, Forced vision planning is also like, as a leader of your firm, you should have a vision for it, because if you don't have a vision, what's everyone doing? Your team, if you have a team as a leader without a vision, where's everyone going? And so they will flounder. But I will say that, like, having to do forced vision planning is really tough. But getting into that state of wonder, I think, is where you have to be to make it work.
Let's tell everybody about this forced vision planning because it's the end of the year. So I think
Oh.
everybody's kind of thinking about that. But you are scheduling it. Why?
Okay. So, well, we met last quarter, and it became apparent that I needed to spend Q4 of this year thinking about our vision. Where are we going? And I haven't done that for a while because, like I said, I was in that place, that complacency phase. And I wasn't really sure where we were going because I didn't know even what was going to make me happy.
Yeah.
So our business coach, Megan, said, Laura, this quarter, Q4, you are reading a book called Vivid Vision, which I did, and you are vision planning for the firm. And I have been. I took her advice. I took a couple of clarity break days, and really put my head down to do that. And even though I struggled at first doing vision planning at the end of this year, I think, like, you put something out into the universe and you open your mind and you're manifesting it. And I feel like it's starting to come to me, like what I do see for the future of the firm. And at first I was like, I don't know. I mean, more projects, and we've got a team and we're cranking out on projects. And what do you mean? What vision? Like, that's it. But no, I think that there is so much more to it. And so, yes, it's still in process. What are you looking for here, Melissa? What do you want me to tell you about the
Like
vision?
that's the part that you like. Like you like getting to set that vision, right? Like I mean, as a
Usually,
leader.
yes, usually. It has been tough though. Like, coming out of my fogginess after COVID, it was tough to see a new vision because I was so burned out. So yeah, I think I needed to take those forced clarity days, and that has been so helpful. So if you're feeling burned out, that's what I would say. Like, take a step back. Stop plowing forward. You're not getting anywhere. Stop putting your head down and going. Step back and freaking breathe and, like, get some space around it. I needed space.
Yeah,
So
and
that
reconnect to your passion for this thing in the first place, or reconnect to what it could potentially be, and it may be entirely different from where we are now.
and then I approach it with my all or nothingness.
Oh, I mean, I struggle with that too.
What psycho I can be about that. So then I'm just like, we're blowing this thing out, and we're going into commercial and hospitality, and Lord knows I hate those facets of design. So then I gotta. That's what Melissa's good at, is she's gonna reel me.
I just love saying no.
No, we love saying, like, those are all really good ideas, but how about that one? Let's grab onto that one
Let's
instead of everything.
refocus. Let's refocus because at the end of all of your vision planning, now as a leader, you have to
Decide.
decide, but then also tell this to your team.
I
And I
know.
think especially when
Hard.
you're going in a different direction, or even if you're going in like a great direction, but maybe it's a little bit more aggressive, in a very positive way. Like, hey, we're going to double revenue, and here's how we're going to do it. That can be
That's
scary if you think, and especially
yeah.
in an individual contributor role where you're somewhat limited, right? Because you don't get to have the freedom to say. I mean, you could. In our team, we're pretty open minded and wanting to hear that kind of feedback, but the impact that you have on that ultimately is so small. And so I just feel like there are times I think when those roles are at odds a little bit. And so trying to get them on the same page is a major challenge.
I agree. And I think, yeah, if you're talking to your team and you do have, those people that are in those individual contributor roles, the first thing they think is, how does this impact me? because that's very much their day-to-day headspace. It's them. That's it. They're very specialized, like you said, and so they immediately go to, "What does this vision that this leader is giving me impact me as an individual contributor?" And so we have to have a lot of sensitivity around that.
Right.
And that's a whole other conversation, like change management. How do you do that?
Yeah,
So
and I mean, you're in charge of it, and doing it in a way that's very objective. I think we started now we're coming full circle to the beginning of the conversation.
yeah. Oh, perfect.
Doing that in an objective way that really I mean, you had mentioned this so well before, but you want to eliminate a lot of your personal feelings about it, while at the same time remaining really sensitive to, yes, this is going to impact people directly and personally. So how do we message that while also staying really sensitive to how they are in the business to keep them motivated?
So if you're a solopreneur, you've got it made, sister. You may want to say right there because you don't have to consider a team scalings. You just plow forward. But then you're doing it all by yourself. So, God, there are pros and cons to everything. This is not easy. This is not
Why did
easy.
you become but why did you go from being a solopreneur to having a team?
It was never even a thought that I was gonna work by myself.
Okay.
I never considered being a sole practitioner for very long, just to launch, that was it, and like I said, I hired somebody within 3 months. As soon as I had enough revenue to hire someone, I did. I didn't wait at all, and I hired the second person a month after that, so
Yeah, okay.
yeah, within my first year, I probably had a team of 5, but I set out to do that, like, my business plan was that. So I wasn't one of those, sole practitioners that was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this for a while and then, add people naturally or not." I just knew I wanted a big firm, and so I approached it like that from day one. So, I bet everyone's different, like, people we've interviewed on this podcast, just some of them say, like, "I fell into it, and,
Yeah.
it just went really well, and, like, I was flowing along, and I got this project, and I talked to that person, and they came on the team." So, it really is it can go any way you want it to.
Yeah.
I was just super intentional.
I will say I feel like a lot of the folks in our mastermind and in our community, they I don't know if they come into it with the intention of growing, but of course, like when we start meeting them, they're growing. So I don't know.
You're
It's
right.
just
Yeah,
they're
they're at that pivot point or that transitional phase where they're ready to, you know, start their retail location and studio and, like, go for it with a physical location and hiring, or they're growing their firm from just themselves and an assistant, or they're hiring their first person, like, they're at some sort of transitional phase when they work with us,
Yeah.
and that's super exciting, like, I love that part of it, so, yeah, I think those, type of design firm owners or those are our people, like, you are our people. If you're listening to this, you're our people.
But if you are an individual contributor, I'd love to know how you make it happen. Like I also can't imagine. I mean, I've worked in very large organizations where, then you do get there's a very clear distinction between individual contributor and leader. But in a small industry, like I mean, like ours, I mean, I don't I most of interior design firms that I know, they're small in relative to, corporations that are 1,000 plus. So I love to know those people who are individual contributors and they want to stay that way. I have a feeling that they won't stay that way for long.
I know, I'd love to hear that too, like, why? Why? If you work on your own, you're a solopreneur, why? Do you just love it? You love that control, yes, let's hear from them, that's such a good point, and if you want to pivot and hire or maybe you're a couple people and you wanna grow to 5, I'd love to hear from you too, like, I guess that makes me so excited, I wanna hear all about that. I've never worked in a big corporate environment before, I've like, even before I started my own firm, I worked for a small residential design company. So I don't even know what it's like to be an individual contributor inside a big firm, a big company like that, corporation. So I don't know.
There's something interesting about being a cog in a machine. I mean, I think the last time I did it, man, I just had the best like coworkers and the best friends. Like it was just like the office every day. Like we could kind of jerk around and, like kind of talk back a little bit to our boss and like nothing mattered because we were just such a machine that everything
Um,
was going to run regardless of like, if we had like a down month, we were going to be okay in the end. Whereas I feel like the impact is so much more intense in a small firm. That like, man, you're having a down month, like that could impact you for 8 months down the road. So you
Oh,
got to
that's so
get on
true.
it.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Different seasons, I guess.
Yeah. And I want to talk to somebody that works in a huge, we're going to put this on the list. We're going to talk to a designer that works for a huge commercial firm.
Mhm.
Going to try, if you know of anybody, send them to me because I want to talk to them. I need to understand. But yeah,
Or
I
maybe
think,
just left that position so they can be honest. How about that?
yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Or we'll just put them in like glasses and a hat and
Yeah, a little voice changer.
incognito. Um, yeah, so I think, does that wrap us up? Like talking about individual contributors versus,
Yeah, I mean, I think we've outlined what the differences are, where we align on that spectrum. And I think that for us, I mean, I've done the individual contributor thing. Like I think I'm over that unless I'm doing something that has no consequence. But I think while I'm working and I'm trying to have an impact, I just feel more naturally inclined to that leadership role. I like the accountability. I like the responsibility. I like being able to motivate a team. I mean, that's why we do Design Dash is because we love
yes.
motivating other interior designers and seeing them succeed. Like that's worth all the pain of having to be responsible for it.
Most days worth the pain. Yeah, so everything you just said just, like, made my energy go way up, so, I'm gonna go, like, individually contribute to something really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'd love to hear from you, so if what we're saying resonates with you, please reach out and, hit the notification and follow button so you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out our next podcast, coming live next week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can find us and more wonderful stories like these on designdash.com. And make sure to follow us at Design Dasher on Instagram and TikTok. Till next time.